Hi guys, it's Agnieszka from 5 Minute Language. Welcome to my channel. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up. So today's video is a little bit different to what I normally post on this channel because this channel is normally about language learning advice. But because some questions come up occasionally about travel, which is obviously related to language learning, I thought I would make a few videos just to see whether you guys are interested in this type of content. So the first video is something that's related to where I live personally. People often ask me this question because I often mention in my videos that I live in London in the UK. And often people are interested in maybe moving to London or coming here for a few months to kind of see what it's like to live here, and they want to know how much it costs. So it's a very important consideration when you're moving to any city or any country, and it's often difficult to know exactly how much it's going to cost you if you just Google it. So I thought I would provide you a brief overview of the main kind of costs that you can expect if you move to London. Are you ready? Let's get started. So the main thing that you will be spending money on when you live in London is accommodation and travel. So obviously accommodation is going to cost you more than travel, but travel is generally very expensive in London. Even if you live sort of in fairly central London, then you will be spending a lot of money on travelling by bus, tube, train and so on. So in terms of accommodation, let me just kind of explain to you how London works. So there are different zones in London. So central London, the very, very centre is zone 1, and then on the outside of that there's zone 2, and basically the zones kind of like go a bit like a donut. So the bigger donut will be zone 3, the donut around it will be zone 4, and so on. And there's quite a few different zones. I think the zones go up to zone 9 even in North London. So the prices of accommodation and travel will depend on which zone you live in. And London is the kind of place where people don't really live in the centre. So if you go to some places, some countries in Europe, towns that are maybe or cities that are smaller than London or small towns, you will see that a lot of accommodation is available in the city centre, and you might want to live there because you don't want to be spending money on transport, you want to be within walking distance of work and school. But in London things kind of work a little bit differently. So there isn't really that much accommodation available in central London. Central London is mainly taken up by office spaces and shopping and kind of like different institutions like museums and different organisations. So there is some accommodation available in central London, but it would be so expensive that an average person wouldn't be able to afford it, essentially. So most people, when you meet people who live in London, they either live in maybe zone 3 or 4, or they live on the outskirts of London because that's where the affordable accommodation is available. So sometimes people live in zone 2, but you might have to pay thousands and thousands of pounds to even rent a place. If you wanted to buy in zone 2, you would probably have to spend like over £1 million on a place. So that's the kind of, to give you a general idea of what to expect. You should probably not expect to live in central London, that's what I'm saying. In terms of renting a place, a lot of people, when they move to London, say they don't have a partner, they're just on their own, they might start out by renting a room in a shared house. This is obviously not an ideal situation if you're a certain age or if you like a certain lifestyle, you want to live on your own, and maybe you're used to living on your own in the country where you come from or another city. But in London, that's a more kind of affordable option for a lot of people, is to rent a room and maybe see how it goes and then see how much you can earn basically, and based on that decide what you want to do next. So for renting a room in London, you'd be looking at, this is just a rough estimate because I did some quick research, I've never actually rented a room myself, but you would be looking at least sort of £400-500 if you're living sort of a bit further out. So if you're living in, say, zone 4 in London, then you might be able to find accommodation for that kind of price. If you want to live in the more sort of trendy areas of London, you might be in zone 3, but in East London, there's lots of kind of like trendy areas where lots of people who work in the media might live, or technology, so they will be prepared to pay a little bit more, and you might struggle to find accommodation for that price. So for a room in those areas, you might even have to pay £700–800 a month. When it comes to renting a whole apartment in London, so again, I'm thinking like zone 3 or 4, you should be prepared to pay about sort of between 1,200 and upwards. So that's like for a basic 1-bedroom apartment, which means you've got a living room and a bedroom and a kitchen and a bathroom. So technically that's like a flat you can share with a couple of people if you're a couple, or one person sometimes uses the living room as their bedroom, and then that's kind of like a setup that I have encountered before. But if you live on your own and you want a 1-bedroom apartment, that's the kind of price that you would be paying. You should look at minimum £1,200 a month, £1,300 a month maybe. This is just a rough estimate, because obviously if you live in trendy areas or central areas, then you might have to pay £2,500 for a flat like that. So there's a lot of variety. There are also areas in London that are very, very expensive. You may have heard of Kensington or Notting Hill. In those places you will be looking at a lot more, so maybe sort of around £1,800–2,000 at least to rent a small apartment. So hopefully this answers your questions, but like I said, it's very difficult to kind of give advice when you don't know what somebody's looking for, and London is such a big place. Like I said, some people live on the suburbs, some people live outside of London and they commute in to go to work. So depending on what kind of lifestyle you want, depending on your situation and your kind of financial situation as well, you will be looking at lots of different types of accommodation. So I would just recommend first try to think like, what do you actually want? Do you want to be able to use the bus to go to work, or do you want to be able to use the tube, or are you okay to travel for 45 minutes on the train to get to work or to school? So these are the kind of considerations that I would recommend you think about before committing yourself to anything. So the next thing I'm going to cover is travel, because that's the second most expensive thing that you will be paying for in London. And travel, usually what people do is they get a travel card, which is essentially a weekly or monthly or annual ticket that you can use on buses, trains, tubes, and all the kind of public transportation in London. So you will be spending, so again, this depends on what zone you're in. If you're in zones 1 to 4, I checked just to give you an idea, because most people actually live, when you kind of interact with people in London, a lot of people live in like zones 3, 4, 5. So just to give you a rough estimate for zone 4, it's going to cost you £194 a month. So I'm making this video in 2019. Obviously fares will go up because they do every year, but you're looking at approximately £200 just for your travel every month from those zones. And if you live in zone 3, then you will be paying £160 a month approximately. If you live further out, you will be paying significantly more. So if you live outside of London, in a kind of little commuter town, you might be within a half-an-hour train journey from London, but you will be paying significantly more for your travel. So when choosing where to live, you need to kind of balance those different factors, like how much you're paying for accommodation and how much you're paying for travel. And, you know, maybe it makes more sense to live closer but pay less for travel, or live a bit further, pay less for accommodation but more for travel. So these are the kinds of things that you need to think about when deciding where to live and how to kind of organize your lifestyle in London. So these are the kind of like essential things. In terms of other bills, obviously they tend to be quite similar around the country, so there's nothing sort of London specific, I guess, when it comes to paying for like internet or your phone or electricity. So I'm not going to cover those things. But I am going to cover sort of like extras. So when you live in a city, you might want to sort of like make the most of it and, you know, get a coffee every now and then, or go out for a meal, or go to the cinema. So these are the kind of things that you would have to pay obviously extra for, and you have to budget for them. So when it comes to coffee, coffee is, I would say, quite expensive, but it depends where you are. So if you're American, you're probably used to like super expensive coffee. I mean, when I went to California, I was really surprised at how much coffee was there, because I was paying literally like, I don't know, $4 or $5 every time I had a coffee. And to me, that was really expensive because I'm used to paying a lot less in London. So to give you a rough idea, the kind of coffee order I usually ask for is a flat white. And usually in London, you can expect to pay between £2.20 and £3 for a flat white, roughly. Obviously, that's a lot more expensive than in some European countries, because I know in Italy you can get a coffee for €1, and obviously that's a very different price range. In terms of eating out, you're probably looking at, well, it depends where you go, but usually if you go to a restaurant and you look at the mains, you will be paying sort of anywhere between £10 and £20 for a main. So it depends on the restaurant again. But if you go out in Soho, which is a place in London where there's a lot of restaurants, you will probably be looking at around sort of £12 to £16 for a main. Maybe like between £5 and £8 for a starter. And in terms of drinks, you will obviously be paying significantly more than in other areas of the country. So maybe like around £6 for a glass of wine, £5 for a beer, or £6 for a beer, depends where you go, if you drink alcohol, obviously. So eating out and drinking out in bars can get very expensive very quickly. So in terms of entertainment, there's a lot of free entertainment in London. There's actually a lot of things you can do for free. You can go to museums for free. So if you're American, you're probably used to paying $25 to get into a museum. Well, in London, you can go to a lot of things for free. So some of the national museums and galleries, and then there's just plenty of events happening around the city all the time that are free. But if you want to go to like a really big event, so like a concert of some sort or a classical music thing, then you would have to pay probably about sort of between 25 and roughly £60. It depends what it is. So, you know, you can pay £100 even if you want to see like Taylor Swift or whatever. But if you want to go to like a classical music concert, then you can probably find something at the sort of like the main place where they happen for like £25. Cinema is quite expensive. So I used to live in Sheffield, which is in the north of England. And I remember, I mean, that was many years ago, but I remember going to cinema for like £6 or £7. Whereas in London at the moment, I haven't actually been to the cinema for a while. When I watch things, I usually watch them on Netflix, so I've been quite bad. But if you want to go to the cinema in London, it is quite standard to actually pay about £15 for a ticket. So it's significantly more than in other places. So these are the kinds of things that you would have to pay for when you live in London. I hope I answered all the questions that you may have, but if you have any additional questions, or if you think anything I said is completely incorrect, then let me know in the comments below. And I'll see you next time. Bye!